So lesson 2 is about statistics. I personally use statistics, not to a crazy extent though. So obviously some of you would have seen the Netflix documentary where Matt Fitzpatrick documents every shot. A lot of you would have seen about Eduardo Molinari and all the fantastic stuff he does with the Ryder Cup and privately with players, documenting all their stats, helping them find areas of improvement. There is a place for stats in the world of golf. My point in this lesson is that I feel like stats are sometimes over-egged. I feel like sometimes we lose the feel and the touch and the artistry of golf by getting too engrossed in the stats. And I feel that there's a greater place for artistry that some of us are maybe missing. And that is where kind of the enjoyment of the game is. Sometimes if we get bogged down in the spreadsheets, I mean, don't get me wrong, if you love an Excel spreadsheet, there are other spreadsheet softwares available, I'm assuming. But if you love a spreadsheet, then go for it. Break down your entire game into stats. Well, I found that when I try to do that and break my game into stats, one, I give up on keeping all the stats straight away because after a round of golf and I'm tired, it's the last thing that I want to be doing. And two, when I get the numbers, it doesn't always kind of show me something, you know? You've then got to analyse the numbers and figure out what does this actually mean. Now, one thing I've learned very quickly in doing this full-time golf journey is that fairways in regulation, greens in regulation and total putts as stats really, while they're easy to keep, they don't really give the full picture. You can hit a fairway and it adds up for your stats, but if you're now blocked out by a tree on the right hand side of the hole and you actually had to be up the left side and you would have been better in the rough up the left side than on the right side of the fairway, that hitting of the fairway doesn't actually do much for you, you know? Likewise, hitting a green, you could hit a green, but you might be 100 foot away, you know? You might barely be on the green. Certainly in St Andrews, where you get some massive greens, you could hit a green and be so far away from the hole. Was that actually a good shot? You've hit a green as opposed to missing a green, but does that mean that you struck the ball well? What does that tell you? And then the total putt stat is exactly what I'm saying. You could be miles away and you could do that all day long with your approach game and two putt everything, and you tell yourself you got 36 putts, and in our minds that's not very good, but actually you've probably done really well from 100 foot all the day. I'm not saying you're going to hit it to 100 foot all the time, I'm sure you're better than that, but you know, you are going to look at those stats and you've got to be really careful with the pictures and the narratives that you try and weave with those stats. So in my mind, it's cool to go on the PGA Tour website and check out all the stats they have there. They have everything, right? They have all the stats, but perfect example of where I think stats can be noisy on the PGA Tour level and it doesn't necessarily tell you the whole story is the 8-foot putt success rate, right? So generally what you'll see, what you'll hear with everyone else who's talking out there in the golf social media sphere is 8-foot putt. If I'm 8 foot from the hole, it's a 50% success rate, essentially, for people who are on the PGA Tour, right? So if I've got 2 balls from 8 feet on a PGA Tour course in tournament play, I'm going to make one of them. That's the consensus, right? That's what the stats show. But the problem with that stat is what it doesn't show is how windy was it? How much break of putt was there? You know, where was the pin? Was it in the middle in a flat bit? Was the pin at a side bit? Was the putt for par or was it for birdie? Sometimes we have mentality shifts depending on what we're putting for. Maybe if it's for double bogey and you're out of the tournament, suddenly that putt becomes a lot easier from 8 feet than if it's Sunday and in contention and I've got this 8-footer to be one ahead with one to play. You know, that just saying that a putt is from 8 foot and this is the success rate really leaves out a lot of key factors. Doesn't tell you how smooth the greens are, doesn't tell you what type of grass you're putting on, doesn't tell you, like I say, how windy it was, whether it was cold, whether you could feel your hands. There's so many factors that aren't embedded into that data. So it can tell you something. It tells us that PGA Tour pros are good from... it tells us that they make half the 8-footers. And then we look at 3 feet, that's where they're 100% success rate, right? But they're also putting on greens that are absolutely perfect. Are we doing that every week? Probably not. Sometimes we're putting, especially this time of year when it's spring, you know, the courses are a bit boggy. Sometimes there's lots of footprints around, sometimes it's bouncy. What's the success rate going to be when those conditions aren't perfect PGA Tour level? So then you've got to be careful taking the numbers from those PGA Tour stats and applying them to your own game. You've got to be careful of the expectations. These are also PGA Tour pros. What are the stats for, you know, a lot of time you see the stats for the scratch golfer. What are the stats for the 12 handicap? What are the stats for the 15? And then what are all the variables? How are you feeling? Did you have your breakfast? You get the idea. There's so many variables that I don't think stats can ever account for. You could have made the last 3 putts in a row from different distances. Now you get over the 8-footer, you're absolutely vibing with confidence. You might have missed your last 3 putts, and now you're not confident over that putt. It just doesn't account for everything that can happen to your feels in a round of golf. And that's why I use stats. I keep an eye on what's feeling good and what's feeling bad, but they are not my be all and end all. There's a place for them, but I'm not going to define all my practice and how I feel like I'm playing in my game based purely on statistics.